Functional organization of human body and control of internal environment. Physiology is the science that seeks to explain the physical and chemical mechanisms that are responsible for origin, development, and progression of life. Each type of life, from simplest virus to the largest tree or the complicated human being, has its own functional characteristic. Therefore, the vast field of physiology can be divided into viral physiology, bacterial physiology, cellular physiology, plant physiology, intervertebrate physiology, vertebrate physiology, mammalian physiology, human physiology, and many more subdivisions. Human physiology. The science of human physiology attempts to explain the specific characteristic and mechanism of the human body that are make it a living being. The fact that we remain alive is the result of complex control systems. Hunger makes us seek food, and fear make us seek refuge. Sensation of cold make us look for the warmth. Other forces cause us to seek fellowship and to reproduce. The fact that we are sensing, feeling, and knowledgeable being is part of this automatic sequence of life. These special attributes allow us to exist under widely varying conditions, which otherwise would make life impossible. Cells are the living unit of the body. The basic living unit of the body is cell. Each organ is an aggregate of many different cells held together by intercellular supporting structures. Each type of cell is specially adapted to perform one or few particular functions. For instance, the red blood cells, numbering about 25 trillion in each human being, transport oxygen from lungs to tissues. Although the red blood cells are the most abundant in any single type of cell in body, about 75 trillion additional cells of other types perform function different from those of the red blood cells. The entire body then contains about 100 trillion cells. Although the many cells of the body often differ markedly from one another, all of them have certain basic characteristics that are alike. For instance, oxygen reacts with carbohydrate, fat, and protein to release the energy required for all cells to function. Further, the general chemical mechanism for changing nutrients into energy are basically same in all cells, and all the cells deliver product of their chemical reaction into the surrounding fluids. Almost all cells also have the ability to reproduce additional cells of their own kind. Unfortunately, when cells of a particular type are destroyed, the remaining cells of this type of usually generate new cells until the supply is replenished. Extracellular fluid, the internal environment. About 60% of the adult human body is fluid, mainly a water solution of ions and other substances. Although most of this fluid is inside the cell and is called intercellular fluid, about 1/3 is the spaces outside the cell and is called extracellular fluid. This extracellular fluid is in constant motion throughout the body. It is transported rapidly in circulating blood and then mixed between the blood and tissue fluid by diffusion through capillary walls. In the extracellular fluid are the ions and nutrients needed by the cell to maintain life. Thus, all cells live in essentially the same environment, the extracellular fluid. For this reason, the extracellular fluid is also called the internal environment of the body, or the milieu intérieur, a term introduced more than 150 years ago by 19th century French physiologist Claude Bernard, 1813 to 1878. Cells are capable of living and performing their special function as long as the proper concentration of oxygen, glucose, different ions, amino acid, fatty substances, and other constituents are available in this internal environment. Differences between extracellular and intracellular fluid. Extracellular fluid contains large amount of sodium chloride and bicarbonate ions plus nutrients for the cells, such as oxygen, glucose, fatty acid, and amino acids. It also contains carbon dioxide that is being transported from the cells to the lungs to be excreted, plus other cellular waste products that are being transported to the kidneys for excretion. The intracellular fluid differs significantly from the extracellular fluid. For example, it contains large amount of potassium, magnesium and phosphate ions instead of sodium and chloride ion found in extracellular fluid. A special mechanism for transporting ions through the cell membrane maintains the ion concentration difference between the extracellular and intracellular fluids. This transport process are discussed in Chapter 4. Homeostasis, maintenance of nearly constant internal environment. In 1929, the American physiologist Walter Cannon (1871 to 1945) coined the term homeostasis to describe the maintenance of nearly constant condition in the internal environment. Essentially, all organs and tissues of the body perform functions that help maintain this relatively constant condition. For instance, the lungs provide oxygen to the extracellular fluid to replenish the oxygen used by the cell. The kidney maintains constant ion concentration and the gastrointestinal system provides nutrients. The various ions, nutrients, waste product and other constituents of the body are normally regulated with the range of values rather than at fixed values. For some of the body constituents, this range is extremely small. Variation in blood hydrogen ion concentration, for example, are normally less than 5 nanomoles per liter. 0.000000005 moles per liter. Blood sodium concentration is also tightly regulated, normally varying only a few millimoles per liter even with a large change in sodium intake. But this variation of sodium concentration are at least 1 million times greater than for hydrogen ions. Powerful control system exist for maintaining the concentration of sodium and hydrogen ions, as well as for the most of the other ions, nutrients and substances in the body at level that permits the cells, tissues and organ to perform their normal function despite wide environmental variation and challenges from injury and diseases. A large segment of this text is concerned with how each organ or tissue contributes to homeostasis. Normal body functions require the integrated action of cells, tissues, organs and their multiple nervous, hormonal and local control systems that together contribute to homeostasis and good health. Disease is often considered to be a state of disrupted homeostasis. However, even in the presence of disease, homeostatic mechanisms continue to operate the maintain vital function through multiple compensations. In some cases, these compensations may themselves lead to major deviation of the body's function from the normal range, making it difficult to distinguish the primary cause of the disease from the compensatory responses. For example, disease that impair the kidney's ability to excrete salt and water may lead to high blood pressure, which initially helps return excretion to normal so that balance between intake and renal excretion can be maintained. This balance is needed to maintain life, but over long periods of time, the high blood pressure can damage various organs, including the kidneys, causing even greater increase in blood pressure and more renal damage. Thus, homeostatic compensation that ensure after injury, disease or major environmental challenges to the body may represent a trade-off that is necessary to maintain vital body function but may in the long term contribute to additional abnormalities of the body function. The discipline of pathophysiology seeks to explain how the various physiological processes are altered in disease or injury. This chapter outlines the different functional systems of the body and their contribution to homeostasis. We then briefly discuss the basic theory of body's control system that allow the functional system to operate in support of one another. Extracellular fluid transport and mixing system. The blood circulatory system. Extracellular fluid is transported through the body in two stages. The first stage is movement of blood through the body in blood vessels, and the second is movement of fluid between the blood capillaries and the intercellular spaces between the tissue cells. Figure 1.1 shows the overall circulation of the blood. All blood in circulation traverses the entire circulatory circuit an average of once each minute when the body is at rest, and as many as 6 times each minute when a person is extremely active. As blood passes through the blood capillaries, continual exchange of extracellular fluid also occurs between the plasma portion of the blood and interstitial fluid that fills the intercellular space. This process is shown in Figure 1.2. The wall of the capillaries are permeable to most molecules in the plasma of blood with the exception of plasma proteins, which are too large to readily pass through the capillaries. Therefore, large amount of fluid and its dissolved constituent diffuse back and forth between the blood and the tissue spaces as shown by the arrows. This process of diffusion is caused by kinetic motion of the molecule in both the plasma and interstitial fluid. That is, the fluid and dissolved molecules are continually moving and bouncing in all directions within the plasma and the fluid in intercellular spaces as well as through the capillary pores. Few cells are located more than 50 micrometer from a capillary, which ensure diffusion of almost any substance from the capillary to cell within a few seconds. Thus, the extracellular fluid everywhere in the body that are of plasma and that of interstitial fluid is continually being mixed, thereby maintaining homogeneity of the extracellular fluid through the body. Origin of nutrients in the extracellular fluid. Respiratory system. Figure 1.1 shows that each time the blood passes through the body, it also flows through the lungs. The blood picks up the oxygen in alveoli, thus acquiring the oxygen needed by the cell. The membrane between the alveoli and the lumen of pulmonary capillaries, the alveolar membrane, is only 0.4 to 2 micrometers thick, and oxygen rapidly diffuses by molecular motion through this membrane into the blood. Gastrointestinal Tract. A large portion of the blood pumped by the heart also passes through the walls of gastrointestinal tract. Here, different dissolved nutrients including carbohydrate, fatty acid, and amino acid are absorbed from the ingested food into the extracellular fluid of the blood. Liver and other organs that perform primarily metabolic function. Not all substance absorbed from the gastrointestinal tract can be used in their absorbed form by the cells. The liver changes the chemical composition of many of these substances to more usable forms. And other tissue of the body, fat cells, gastrointestinal mucosa, kidney, and endocrine glands, help modify the absorbed substances or store them until they are needed. The liver also eliminates certain waste products produced in the body and toxic substances that are ingested. Musculoskeletal System. How does musculoskeletal system contribute to homeostasis? The answer is obvious and simple. Where it is not for the muscles, the body could not move to obtain food required for the nutrition. The musculoskeletal system also provides motility for protection against adverse surroundings, without which the entire body along with its homeostatic mechanism could be destroyed. Removal of metabolic end products. Removal of carbon dioxide by lungs. At the same time the blood picks up oxygen in the lungs, carbon dioxide is released from the blood into the lung alveoli. The respiratory movement of air into and out of the lungs carries the carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is the most abundant of all the metabolism products. Kidneys. Passage of the blood through the kidneys removes the plasma, most of the other substances beside carbon dioxide that are not needed by the cells. These substances include different end products of the cellular metabolism. such as urea and uric acid. They also include excess of ions and water from the food that might have accumulated in extracellular fluid. The kidneys performs their function by first filtering large quantity of plasma through glomerular capillaries into the tubules and then reabsorbing into the blood the substances needed by the body such as glucose, amino acid, appropriate amount of water and many of the ions. Most of the other substances that are not needed by the body, especially metabolic waste products such as urea, are reabsorbed poorly and pass through the renal tubules into urine. Gastrointestinal tract. Undigested material that enters the gastrointestinal tract and some waste product of the metabolism are eliminated in the feces. Liver. Among the function of liver is the detoxification or removal of many drugs and chemicals that are ingested. The liver secretes many of this waste into the bile to be eventually eliminated into the feces. Regulation of body functions. Nervous system. The nervous system is composed of three major parts: the sensory input portion, the central nervous system or integrative portion, and the motor output portion. Sensory receptors detect the state of the body or the state of surrounding. For instance, receptors in the skin alert us whenever the object touches the skin at any point. The eyes are sensory organs that give a visual image of surrounding area. The ears are also sensory organs. The central nervous system is composed of brain and spinal cord. The brain can store information, generate thoughts, create ambition, and determine reaction that the body performs in response to the sensation. Appropriate signals are then transmitted through the motor output portion of the nervous system to carry out one's desires. An important segment of the nervous system is called Autonomic System. It operates at a subconscious level and controls many functions of the internal organ, including the level of pumping activity by the heart, movements of the gastrointestinal tract, and secretion by many of the body's glands. Hormonal System. Located in the body are 8 major endocrine glands and several organs and tissue that secrete chemical substance called hormones. Hormones are transported in the extracellular fluid to other part of the body to help regulate cellular function. For instance, thyroid hormone increases the rates of most chemical reaction in all cells, thus helping to set the tempo of bodily activity. Insulin control glucose metabolism, adrenocortical hormone control sodium and potassium ions and protein metabolism, and parathyroid hormone controls the bone calcium and phosphate. Thus, the hormones provide a system for regulation that complements the nervous system. The nervous system regulates many muscular and sensory activities of the body, whereas the hormonal system regulates many metabolic functions. The nervous system and hormonal system normally work together in a coordinated manner to control essentially all of the organ system of the body. Protection of the body. Immune system. The immune system consists of the white blood cells, tissue cells derived from the white blood cells, the thymus, lymph node, and lymph vessel that protect the body from pathogens such as bacteria, virus, parasite, and fungi. The immune system provides a mechanism for the body to distinguish its own cell from foreign cell and substances and destroy the invader by phagocytosis or by producing sensitized lymphocyte or specialized proteins, example antibodies, that either destroy or neutralize the invader. Integumentary system. The skin and its various appendages, including the hair, nails, glands, and other structure, cover, cushion, and protect the deeper tissue and organs of the body, and generally provide a boundary between the body's internal environment and the outside world. The integumentary system is also important for the temperature regulation and excretion of waste, and it provides a sensory interface between the body and the external environment. The skin generally comprises about 12 to 15% of the body weight. Reproduction. Sometimes reproduction is not considered as a homeostatic function. It does, however, help maintain homeostasis by generating new beings to take the place of those. Reproduction. Sometimes reproduction is not considered as homeostatic function. It does, however, help maintain homeostasis by generating new beings to take the place of those that are dying. This may sound like a permissive usage of the term homeostasis, but it illustrates that in the final analysis, essentially all body structures are organized such that they help maintain the automaticity and continuity of life. Control systems of the body. The human body has thousands of control systems. Some of the most intricate of these systems are the genetic control system that operate in all the cells to help control intracellular and extracellular functions. This subject is discussed in Chapter 3. Many other control systems operate within the organs to control function of the individual part of the organs. Others operate throughout the entire body to control the interrelations between the organs. For instance, the respiratory system operating in association with nervous system regulates the concentration of carbon dioxide in the extracellular fluid. The liver and pancreas regulate the concentration of glucose in the extracellular fluid, and the kidneys regulate concentration of hydrogen, sodium, potassium, phosphate, and other ions in the extracellular fluid. Examples of control mechanism. Regulation of oxygen and carbon dioxide concentration in the extracellular fluid. Because oxygen is one of the major substances required for the chemical reaction in the cell, the body has a special control mechanism to maintain an almost exact and constant oxygen concentration in the extracellular fluid. This mechanism depends principally on the chemical characteristic of the hemoglobin, which is present in all red blood cells. Hemoglobin combines with oxygen as the blood passes through the lungs. Then, as the blood passes through the capillaries, through the tissue capillaries, hemoglobin, because of its own strong chemical affinity for oxygen, does not release oxygen into the tissue fluid if too much oxygen is already there. However, if the oxygen concentration in the tissue fluid is too low, sufficient oxygen is released to re-establish an adequate concentration. Thus, regulation of oxygen concentration in the tissues is vested principally in the chemical characteristics of hemoglobin. This regulation is called the oxygen buffering function of hemoglobin. Carbon dioxide concentration in the extracellular fluid is regulated in much different way. Carbon dioxide is a major end product of the oxidative reactions in the cell. If all the carbon dioxide formed in the cells continue to accumulate into the tissue fluid, all energy-giving reaction of the cells would cease. Fortunately, a higher than normal carbon dioxide concentration in the blood excites the respiratory center, causing a person to breathe rapidly and deeply. This deep, rapid breathing increases expiration of carbon dioxide and therefore removes excess carbon dioxide from blood and tissue fluids. This process continues until the concentration returns to the normal. Regulation of arterial blood pressure. Several systems contribute to the regulation of arterial blood pressure. One of these, the baroreceptor system, is a simple and excellent example of a rapidly acting control mechanism. Figure 1.3. In the walls of bifurcation region of the carotid arteries in the neck and also in the arch of the aorta in the thorax are many nerve receptors called baroreceptors that are stimulated by stretch of arterial wall. When the arterial pressure rises too high, the baroreceptors send barrages of the nerve impulses to the medulla of the brain. Here, these impulses inhibit the vasomotor center, which in turn decreases the number of impulses transmitted from the vasomotor center through the sympathetic nervous system to the heart and blood vessels. Lack of these impulses causes diminished pumping activity by the heart and also dilation of the peripheral blood vessels, allowing increased blood flow through the vessels. Both of these effects decrease the arterial pressure, moving it back to the normal. Conversely, a decrease in arterial pressure below normal relaxes the stretch receptor, allowing the vasomotor center to become more active than usual, thereby causing vasoconstriction and increased heart pumping. The decrease in arterial pressure also raises the arterial pressure, moving it back to the normal. Normal ranges and physical characteristic of important extracellular fluid constituents. Table 1.1. List some of the important constituent and physical characteristic of extracellular fluid along with their normal values, normal ranges and maximum limits without causing death. Note that narrowness of the normal range for each one, values outside these ranges are often caused by illness, injury, or major environmental challenges. Most important are the limits beyond which abnormalities can cause death. For example, an increase in the body temperature of only 11 degrees Fahrenheit, that is 7 degrees Celsius, above normal can lead to a vicious cycle of increasing cellular metabolism that destroy the cells. Note also the narrow range for acid-base balance in the body, with a normal pH value of 7.4 and lethal values only about 0.5 on either side of the normal. Another important factor is the potassium ion concentration, because whenever it decreases to the less than 1/3 normal, a person is likely to be paralyzed as a result of inability of nerves to carry signals. Alternatively, if potassium ion concentration increases to 2 or more times normal, the heart muscle is likely to be severely depressed. Also, when calcium ion concentration falls below 1/2 normal, a person is likely to experience tetanic contraction of muscle throughout the body because of the spontaneous generation of excess nerve impulses in the peripheral nerves. When glucose concentration falls below 1/2 normal, a person frequently exhibits extreme mental irritability and sometimes even has convulsions. This example should give one an appreciation for the extreme values and even the necessity of the vast number of control systems that keep the body operating in the health. In absence of any one of these controls, serious body malfunction or death can result. Characteristic of control systems. The aforementioned examples of homeostatic control mechanism are only a few of many thousand in the body, all of which have certain characteristics in common as explained in this section. Negative feedback nature of most control systems. Most control systems of the body act by negative feedback, which can best be explained by reviewing some of the homeostatic control systems mentioned previously. In the regulation of carbon dioxide concentration, a high concentration of carbon dioxide in the extracellular fluid increases pulmonary ventilation. This in turn decreases the extracellular fluid carbon dioxide concentration because the lungs expire greater amounts of the carbon dioxide from the body. In other words, the high concentration of carbon dioxide initiates events that decreases the concentration towards normal, which is negative to the initiating stimulus. Conversely, a carbon dioxide concentration that falls too low results in the feedback to increase the concentration. This response is also negative to the initiating stimulus. In the arterial pressure regulating mechanism, a high pressure causes a series of reactions that promote a lowered pressure, or a lower pressure causes a series of reactions that promote an elevated pressure. In both instances, these effects are negative with respect to the initiating stimulus. Therefore, in general, if some factor become excessively or deficient, a control system initiates negative feedback, which consists of a series of changes that return the factor toward a certain mean value, thus maintaining homeostasis. Gain of a control system. The degree of effectiveness with which a control system maintains constant conditions is determined by the gain of negative feedback. For instance, let us assume that a large volume of blood is transfused into a person whose baroreceptor pressure control system is not functioning, and the arterial pressure rises from the normal level of 100 mmHg up to the 175 mmHg. Then, let us assume that the same volume of blood is injected into the same person when the baroreceptor system is functioning, and this time the pressure increases only 25 mmHg. Thus, the feedback control system that caused a correction of minus 50 mmHg, that is from 175 mmHg to 125 mmHg, there remains an increase in pressure of plus 25 mmHg called the error, which means that the control system is not 100% effective in preventing change. The gain of system is then calculated by using the following formula. Gain is equal to correction upon error. Thus, in the baroreceptor system example, the correction is minus 50 mmHg and error persisting is plus 25 mmHg. Therefore, the gain of person's baroreceptor system for control of arterial pressure is minus 50 divided by plus 25 or minus 2. That is, a disturbance that increases or decreases the arterial pressure does so only 1/3 as much as would occur if this control system were not present. The gains of some other psychologic control system are much greater than that of baroreceptor system. For instance, the gain of system controlling internal body temperature when a person is exposed to moderately cold weather is about minus 33. Therefore, one can see that temperature control system is much more effective than the baroreceptor pressure control system. Positive feedback can sometimes cause vicious cycles and death. Why do most control systems of the body operate by negative feedback rather than positive feedback? If one considers the nature of positive feedback, it is obvious that positive feedback leads to instability rather than stability. In some cases can cause death. Figure 1.4 shows an example in which death can ensue from positive feedback. This figure depicts the pumping effectiveness of the heart, showing that the heart of a healthy human being pumps about 5 liters of the blood per minute. If the person is suddenly bled 2 liters, the amount of blood in the body is decreased to such a low level that not enough blood is available for the heart to pump effectively. As a result, the arterial pressure falls and the flow of blood to the heart muscle through the coronary vessels diminishes. This scenario results in the weakening of heart, further diminishing pumping, a further decrease in coronary blood flow, and still more weakness of the heart. The cycle repeats itself again and again until the death occurs. Note that each cycle in the feedback results in further weakening of the heart. In other words, the initiating stimulus causes more of the same, which is positive feedback. Positive feedback is better known as a vicious cycle, but a mild degree of positive feedback can be overcome by the negative feedback control mechanisms of the body, and the vicious cycle then fails to develop. For instance, if the person in the aforementioned example is bled only 1 liter instead of 2 liters, the normal negative feedback mechanism for controlling cardiac output and arterial pressure can counterbalance the positive feedback and person can recover, as shown by the dashed curve of figure 1.4. Positive feedback can sometimes be useful. In some instances, the body uses positive feedback to its advantage. Blood clotting is an example of valuable use of positive feedback when a blood vessel is ruptured and a clot begins to form. Multiple enzymes called clotting factor are activated within the clot. Some of these enzymes act on other unactivated enzymes of the immediately adjacent blood, thus causing more blood clotting. This process continues until the hole in vessel is plugged and bleeding no longer occurs. On occasion, this mechanism can get out of the hand and cause formation of unwanted clots. In fact, this is what initiates most acute heart attacks, which can be caused by a clot beginning on the inside surface of an atherosclerotic plaque in the coronary artery and then growing until the artery is blocked. Childbirth is another instance in which positive feedback is valuable. When uterine contraction begins strong enough for the baby's head to begin pushing through the cervix, stretching of the cervix sends signal through the uterine muscle back to the body of uterus, causing even more powerful contractions. Thus, the uterine contraction stretch the cervix and the cervical stretch cause stronger contractions. When this process becomes powerful enough, the baby is born. If it is not powerful enough, the contraction usually die out and a few days pass before they begin again. Another important use of positive feedback is for the generation of nerve signals. That is, stimulation of the membrane of nerve fiber causes slight leakage of sodium ions through sodium channels in the nerve membrane to the fiber's interior. The sodium ions entering the fiber then change the membrane potential, which in turn causes more opening of the channel, more change of potential, still more opening of channel, and so forth. Thus, a slight leak becomes an explosion of the sodium entering the interior of the nerve fiber, which creates the nerve action potential. This action potential in turn causes electrical current to flow along the both outside and inside of the fiber and initiate additional action potentials. This process continues again and again until the nerve signal goes all the way to the end of fiber. In each case in which positive feedback is useful, the positive feedback is part of an overall negative feedback process. For example, in the case of blood clotting, the positive feedback clotting process is a negative feedback process for maintenance of normal blood volume. Also, the positive feedback that causes nerve signal allows the nerves to participate in thousands of negative feedback nervous control system. More complex types of control system, adaptive control. Later in this text, when we study the nervous system, we shall see that this system contains great number of interconnected control mechanisms. Some are simple feedback system similar to those already discussed, many are not. For instance, some movement to the body occurs so rapidly that there is not enough time for nerve signal to travel from the peripheral parts of the body all the way to brain and then back to the periphery again to control the movement. Therefore, the brain uses a principle called feed-forward control to cause required muscle contractions. That is, sensory nerve signals from the moving parts apprise the brain whether the movement is performed correctly. If not, the brain corrects the feed-forward signal that it sends to the muscles the next time the movement is required. Then, if still further correction is necessary, this process will be performed again for subsequent movements. This process is called adaptive control. adaptive control, in a sense, is delayed negative feedback. Thus, one can see how complex the feedback control system of the body can be. A person's life depends on all of them. Therefore, a major share of this text is devoted to discussing these life-giving mechanisms. Summary: Automaticity of the body. The purpose of this chapter has been to point out, first, the overall organization of the body, and second, the means by which the different parts of the body operate in harmony. To summarize, the body is actually a social order of about 100 trillion cells organized into different functional structures, some of which are called organs. Each functional structure contributes its share to the maintenance of homeostatic conditions in the extracellular fluid, which is called the internal environment. As long as normal conditions are maintained in this internal environment, the cell of the body continues to live and function properly. Each cell benefits from the homeostasis, and in turn, each cell contributes its share toward the maintenance of homeostasis. This reciprocal interplay provides continuous automaticity of the body until one or more functional systems lose their ability to control their share of function. When this happens, all the cells of the body suffer. Extreme dysfunction leads to the death. Moderate dysfunction leads to the sickness. Thank you.